So I and a group of friends are all interested in what I call alternative parenting, which is like sex-positive parenting, polyamorous parenting, parenting from different sexual identities, parenting in various alternative ways, platonic co-parenting, all of that kind of stuff. And I personally have a background with extensive BDSM activism and speaking. I gave a talk at the Center for Sex and Culture years ago. And I'm a huge supporter of EFF, huge supporter of the Center for Sex and Culture. Was really excited to see this organization come up. And that's why I'm here. And I promoted it to a bunch of people I know. So, and I just want to pass on something that I heard from someone because I'm curious about your response to this thing. They sent it in an email, and I got this email like an hour before I came. So I haven't had that much time to digest it myself, but it was kind of an intense email to receive. This is a friend of mine who's also very sex positive. She's a mom. She's like, in general, really on board with these sites. She's a huge supporter of the EFF, all of this kind of stuff. And she said, I'm a little nervous about this organization from my impression of what they've written on Medium and things like the people who they follow on Twitter, obvious pedophiles who declare themselves as such. My impression is that this is people who want to give credibility to pedophilia or pedophilia by doing things like encouraging pedophiles to be out and doing stuff like legalizing child sex robots. That sounds ridiculous when I write it, but that's their angle. I have to question if fighting for our rights to make sex bots that look like children is a good approach to things. I get that there could be an ethical gray area and people are pervy in various ways, but it strikes me as unsavory. That's my 2 cents. What do you think if you look over Jeremy's articles? And then she gave me like a list of articles. And then she was like, I was a bit shocked to see the Center for Sex and Culture hosting this, so it was really wild to see it come in from you in your parenting group. And so, again, this is not, like, this is someone I know speaking. Like, I read the articles. I thought they were really interesting and well-balanced. In my experience as someone who has written and spoken and lectured on like wide varieties of human sexuality, I have had people come to me and talk to me about their sexual fantasies. And sometimes those fantasies have involved children. And when I've talked to people who have those fantasies, I've had no reason to think that they're committing crimes in real life. And typically they've expressed an enormous amount of shame and asked for help in understanding what is going on with them. So my sort of instinctual perspective is to try and understand what you could do to help people like this, how you could take a fact-based approach and protect children in a way that is evidence-based and doesn't stigmatize people who haven't actually done anything wrong. But I think, yeah, I guess I'll just leave it at that. The whole exchange was really shook me a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, that is a very intense question, you're right. And I think that that kind of concern is likely to be shared by other people. We do have a culture in which you've probably heard of the QAnon conspiracy theories that are going around and Pizzagate and stuff like this. So the concept of there being people in our society who have a sexual attraction to children or to adolescents is something that freaks people out so much that they kind of shut their brains down a little and don't look at it in what I would consider a rational, fact-based way. And the rational way that I like to look at it is, according to science, there are people who have this sexual attraction. It's normally not something that they want. It's definitely not something that they've chosen. According to the research that exists, it's kind of something that they discover in themselves and would rather not have. So amongst those group of people, who are not the majority of sexual offenders against children, by the way, it's a minority of people who offend against children who actually are pedophiles or ephebophiles, they have a choice. They have the choice to offend or not to offend. So what Prostasia is doing, we don't work directly with them. We do work with researchers and with other groups who may counsel these people. and what we try to promote is the idea of steering as many of them as possible away from offending. And sometimes that does involve providing them with peer support services, professional support services, information, education. So this does make some people uncomfortable, but it's actually something that I believe in very firmly and I stand by. And I think our record in terms of the advisors and the directors of Prostasia kind of speaks for itself. Where we're coming from speaks for itself. And I'm happy to engage in this sort of conversation with people who do have questions like that. And I actually welcome them to engage with us and to set their own minds at ease, because it is a difficult topic. And so I thank you for bringing that question this evening. Would anyone else like to add anything to that?
Actually, so especially, I only have one. Especially regarding, say, things like childlike sex robots. That one is really easy to have a knee-jerk reaction to. I spent more than 10 years in childcare. I care very much about caring for children and protecting them. And so for me, that's definitely one where like my knee-jerk is like, oh my God, we can't, like, no, that's not okay. But the reality is that we don't have the research to know if that would keep somebody from offending. And personally, I'd rather have, and this, even a position like this can be misconstrued and sound wrong to people, but I'd rather have somebody with a childlike robot than an actual child. If it keeps somebody from actually offending, from keeping in mind that this is an attraction that they can't necessarily, I don't want to say control, because that sounds like then any kid who walks by they have to jump on. Not like that. But you don't have a ton of control over what you're just instinctually into. And you don't know actually that it's wrong until society tells you that it's wrong. So for minor attracted people, it's like, as far as we know, the vast majority are not offenders. It's just that we only hear about the offenders. There are a lot of people with these kinds of attractions. And so the thing to take away from things like creeper and child sex, and the things that really strike you with that knee jerk of like, no, that's not okay, is to keep in mind that there isn't a lot of research about this stuff. And without the research, maybe the research will show that, no, this is absolutely a terrible idea, oh my God, what were we doing? But until we have the research to know, then we're just kind of taking a shot in the dark and not actually protecting children. So.
I just want to add that I think we're living in a time when people are frequently willing to think that making policy based on belief is a good idea. I'm not sure that's correct. And I think that when we get as much knowledge as possible, I mean, again, this is a core principle of sexology, that trying to understand the often stigmatized range of human sexuality is a valuable project that allows for more useful ways of intervening in things that are problematic and may eventually help us to figure out ways to deconstruct homophobia and transphobia and biphobia. You know, kinkphobia. There are so many reasons for us to appreciate research around any kind of sexuality. And what Jeremy said about research about child sexual offenders is quite correct. There's not as much as we would like to see. There's not a lot of funding for almost any sex research, unless there's going to be a pill that someone can sell at the end, or in some cases, there's a clear sexual health intervention that can come out of it at the end. If it doesn't have to do with sex and or pharmacology, getting money to do sex research is really problematic. And that allows so many of us in this different belief-laden community in which we now reside in this country to believe that antipathy is the same thing as knowledge. In some cases, that might prove to be true. In other cases, antipathy doesn't stop the problem. And that's what makes me feel as though this is a worthwhile use of the Center for Sex and Culture space. We'd like to see real movement that really makes a difference in people's lives.